Hello everybody, welcome back to Reading for Vocabulary. I'm Brian Stuart. We're looking at our unit title here, Imaginary Characters. And as you know, there's so many different imaginary characters in storybooks and movies. I'm sure you have some of your favorite imaginary characters, don't you? If you think about your favorite stories or your favorite movies, who are your favorite imaginary characters? We can really get excited about them, can't we? Well, in this lesson, we're going to learn about an imaginary character. His name is Paul Bunyan, and it's called Mighty Paul Bunyan, because mighty means strong. We'll look at that in the vocabulary. In this lesson, we're going to learn about Mighty Paul Bunyan. He's an imaginary character. We can see him here. Whoa, he's really tall, isn't he? Paul Bunyan was thought to be a giant, right? Now, people think, is there a real person? Sometimes stories are based on a real person. And people were thinking, was there a real person named Paul Bunyan? We're not sure. This story, he's a character in a folk tale. A folk tale. Folk tales are stories that people tell each other from a long time ago. And sometimes folk tales might have a true story as the beginning, but we don't know because nobody wrote it down. They just told each other for many, many years. And sometimes the story grows and gets bigger and the characters change a little bit. Maybe there was a really big character a long time ago who was like Paul Bunyan, but nowadays when we think about Paul Bunyan, we think about a giant, right? He's many meters tall, right? And he has an axe here. This is an axe. And what does he do? He cuts down trees. His folktale, the folktales about Paul Bunyan were a long time ago in America when many men went into the forest and cut down trees for wood because the nation, America, needed wood to build houses and to build many things. So there were many people like him in the world. And so these stories started. But who's that? What is this? This is a big blue cow? Well, actually, it's not a cow, it's an ox. It's Babe, his name was Babe the Blue Ox. And we'll learn about his character later. But Babe the Blue Ox and Paul Bunyan, they were partners, right? They were friends, okay? And Babe the Blue Ox was a big, kind of like a cow. An ox is like a cow, but it's a very big and strong cow with big horns, as you can see. So these are the characters we're going to learn about today in this lesson. But first, let's start with the vocabulary words. First of all, we have this person. He looks familiar. He kind of looks like Paul Bunyan. But this word is a person who cuts down trees. This describes Paul Bunyan's job. What was Paul Bunyan's job? What was he? He was that's a big word, a lumberjack. Lumberjack. Now you may know the word lumber. Lumber is wood. Wood from trees is lumber. Jack, maybe just the name of a person. Lumberjack is a person who cuts down trees. Paul Bunyan was a lumberjack. Okay. Next one, a small fire at a camp. Do you ever go camping with your friends or your family? Sometimes maybe your family takes you to Soraksan or Woraksan or Chirisan, right? There's many mountains in Korea. You can go camping. At night, sometimes the family will sit around this. It's a small fire at a camp. It's actually a campfire. Campfire. See, we use these two words together and it's called campfire. So you build a little fire at your camp, and many people will tell stories around the campfire. And so we can think of many imaginary characters like Paul Bunyan people are telling stories around the campfire. Okay, next one. Oh, okay, these kids are having a fun time. They look very happy, don't they? They're listening to a story. Another word for a story is a tale. Tale and story, tokateo, right? It means the same thing. A story is a tale. Before I taught you folk tale, right? Folk tale is like folk story. You could say either one. Okay, so story and tale, same thing. Next one, total. A total. So if everybody gets together, they are the total, they are the whole. Let's say these people are working together. They are a whole team, right? They are the total sum of the team. If one person is missing, they're not whole. They must be together to have the team, maybe an office, a team in the office, or some type of organization. They are the whole team. But it's not just people, right? It can be a set of toys. If you have 5 different toys, they make the total set. They are the whole set. So in that case, you could say the whole set of toys. The whole set of food. The whole set of whatever. The whole. They're all together. Okay, the next picture. Wow, this is a very beautiful picture of nature, right? Don't you want to go there? This is a place without people. There's nobody in this place. It's nobody lives there. Maybe people have walked through there before, but if you look at the picture, there's nobody there, and there's no sign of any human activity. This is what we call wilderness. Wilderness. That's a long word. Wilderness. Wilderness. Now I said wilderness, but actually it comes from this word here, wild. If you think of just nature, right? Just nature. Nature, natural, is wild. It's in the wild, right? We don't live in the wild. We live in villages or towns or cities. But if we go away from all of that and there's no sign of any human activity, that's just nature. It's in the wild, okay? And we call places like that wilderness. There's no homes, no roads, no telephones. Maybe you can have your cell phone, maybe you have coverage, but there's nothing there except for nature. Trees, mountains, meadows, forest, things like that. That's wilderness. Okay, next. Next is an area where fruit trees are grown. This is not wilderness, right? This is a farm. It's a place, especially it's an area where fruit trees are grown. We have a special name for this kind of farm. It's called an orchard. 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 So if you wonder, where do your apples come from, right? Where do oranges come from? Where do cherries come from, right? Cherries, mashita, right? Where do they come from? They come from trees. And these trees are grown in a field like this. They're not just, random trees out in nature. Farmers will plant the cherry trees or the apple trees or the orange trees in rows, so they're all there and they're easy to pick. And that's called an orchard, right? So if you want to get fresh fruit and very cheap, go to the orchard in the fall. That's when the fruit is ready, it's ripe, and it's ready to eat. It's a good place to go, right? So that's an orchard. Okay, next one. Don't you want to go scuba diving? Do you want to see this underwater? A wild and exciting experience. If you go scuba diving, you will have an adventure because you can see the coral and the fish, maybe other scuba divers looking at you, right? We can see this is an adventure. Adventure. An adventure is an exciting time. It's maybe a wild time. Wild, maybe you go into nature. Or wild also means not controlled. You don't know what's going to happen, right? So it can be an adventure because you don't know what's going to happen. And it's very exciting what does happen. That's an adventure. Okay. Next one. These kids are having fun, right? With great happiness. What do we say? Joyously. Joy. You know the word joy. Joy is happy, right? You say 기분이 좋다, right? 기분이 좋아요? That's joy. I'm very happy. But we say joyously, it means with great happiness. This describes how you do something or how something is done. If you watch a TV show and you watch it with a lot of happiness, you are watching joyously. Okay? If you're reading a book, 너무 재밌어요, right? Very good book. And you really are happy when you read the book, you read the book joyously. So this word goes with a verb. Read joyously, watch joyously, play joyously. So this word goes with verbs to describe how the action is done. Okay? Next one. Twisting. Have you ever been on a road like this? This is a very adventurous road, right? But twisting, another word for twisting is winding. To twist, right? And to wind, they're kind of similar. This is wind, not wind. Okay? Spelled the same, but different pronunciation. Twist means to twist something, right? You take a ribbon and you twist it so it's not straight, you twist it. Wind also can be like this. You take a string and you wind the string. You can wind the string around something else. It just means not straight, right? It's winding or twisting, like a road. This is a very fun road to ride your bike on, right? Whee! You go around the curves. But be careful, there might be a car. So 조심해요. But it's a very fun road to be on, right? Okay, so twisting or winding. It's a winding road. Next one. Oh, look at that. That's crazy. One eye, big nose, one tooth, and a foot. What kind of crazy thing is that? It's unreal or fictional. It's not real, right? So we can say it's imaginary. You guys, imaginary. Whew, right? Big word. Imaginary. Imaginary. Wow, 5 sounds all together in one word. Imaginary. If we think about it, you can see this word imagine, and if we put an E, right? Imagine means to think of something not real, but to have an idea of something different. If you can imagine yourself in a different world. Sometimes when you read books, you can imagine yourself like in a spaceship or on another planet or fighting dragons with a sword, right? This is what we imagine. It's all imaginary, those things. So it's not real, it's fictional. I've never seen a character like this, right? It's not real, it's imaginary. Just in people's minds, in your imagination. You can also say imagination. Whoops, slow. Imagination, that's the noun, right? Imagination is the place in your head where you think of these things, or it's the ideas that you have. It's your imagination. Is your imagination good? Do you have a good imagination? That means you can imagine many different things. I hope you have a good imagination. I'm sure you do. Okay, next one. Uh-oh, what happened here? To hold something together with a rope, right? Now, this is an extreme example. Usually you hold your shoe together with rope. Don't tie people up with rope, right? But what this is tie. I just used that word, tie. Tie is a verb to hold something together with a rope. So if these two people are tied together, they're tied together. Now, normally we tie things in our life. If you have a shoe with shoelaces, you tie the shoelaces together. That's very common. Many people do that every day. So that just, to hold something with a rope, you tie it. Also, if you have many things you want to carry from one place to another, you could put packages or your backpack, you could tie it to the back of your bicycle and it doesn't fall off when you ride to school. So you could tie many things with rope. Okay, next one. Whoa, looks like a strong person there. Do you lift weights? This person is lifting weights. Lift weights. To lift weights. And you get very big muscles, right? Okay, very strong and powerful. Another word for this person is mighty. We saw this word before on the title, mighty Paul Bunyan. So it means that Paul Bunyan, the imaginary character, is very strong and he's really powerful. He can do many things with his body because he's really strong. He's very powerful. Okay. Next one, to move something from side to side very fast. So if something's moving like this, if you take something in your hand and you move it like this or up and down, around, let's say you want to mix something, right? So you have ice and lemonade and you mix it like this. What are you doing? You are shaking, to shake. You can also just shake your body like this, right? If you're cold, people shake, okay? Stop shaking. Okay, stop shaking. So shake is to shake. Also, very common, what else do we shake? We shake hands, right? When we meet another person, we shake their hands. That's what Western people do, especially in America, right? In Korea, we usually bow, but in America, they usually shake the hands of the person. And that's like saying, hello, how are you? Shake is an irregular verb, so we use it, it changes form in the past, okay? So we say shake, shook, shaken, okay? Shake, shook, shaken. That's how we use this word in the past. It's an irregular verb. Okay, next one. Here is another picture of it looks like a cow, right? But it looks like a little bit of a strange cow. It's not a normal cow. Look at this. It's a bull used for farm work, right? So it's a bull. A bull means namja, right? Not yoja, namja. So it's a namja cow, okay? But it's used for farm work. And look, it's got these big horns. Ooh, okay? It's got a big hump on its back, and it looks very strong, right? There's a special word we use for that. It's ox. Aha! Remember Paul Bunyan's friend I told you about before was a big blue ox. Okay? So that's an imaginary character, but it's based on this type of animal. A bull, a namja, a male cow, used for working on the farm. You can tie something to the ox and it will pull something. Usually farmers use the oxes to help them plow the field. Plow the field. And what they do is they put a big blade, like a big piece of iron, and the ox drags it on the ground and it digs a line and the farmers can plant their plants in that line. So oxes are used to plow the field. That's called to plow the field. And so oxes and horses are used to do that. Okay, but oxes are very strong and they may be stronger than horses sometimes. Okay, 15. Oh no, it's terrible, right? Mogiwata, right? A mosquito came and bit her on the arm. We can see that. We all know that, right? Oh, I hate that. Mogi shirayo, right? I really hate the mosquitoes. A feeling on your skin that you want to scratch. So if a mosquito came and bit you, right? You have a feeling, you want to scratch it. What is that feeling? We say it's an itch, right? I have an itch. Excuse me, I have an itch. I have an itch on my arm. When I wear shorts, banpaji, right? And at nighttime, if I'm in the forest, all the mosquitoes really bite my ankles. Oh, I hate it. I have an itch on my ankles, on my foot. Oh, no mo shirayo, right? So I have an itch. I have an itch. You can also say, my foot itches. Whoops. Itches. So, itch can be a noun. It can also be used as a verb. It itches. My foot itches. Oh, my hand itches. It itches. Like I have a bite, I just say it itches. So it can be a noun, I have an itch, or verb, it itches. Okay? What do? You scratch. Scratch and itch. Don't say I itch my arm. No, that's crazy. You don't itch your arm. Your arm itches, so you scratch it. Okay? But be careful. Don't scratch it too much because that's not good. If your hand is dirty and you scratch it too hard, you might break the skin and then it can get infected. So be careful, right? Don't scratch too much. I know it's terrible. It drives you crazy. I hate itching, right? But maybe put some cream on it or some medicine, okay? Okay, next one. Okay, to use an axe to make something fall. So before we talked about lumberjacks, right? That was our first word. Lumberjacks usually use an axe and they chop down trees. So they hit the tree with the axe and the tree falls down. So chop down means to use an axe to make something fall. Oh, by the way, look at this. Axe. Before, on the first picture when I was talking about Paul Bunyan, I looked at his axe and I spelled it that way, axe. It doesn't matter. You can spell it A-X or A-X-E. Both spellings are acceptable in English. Okay, so don't be confused about that one. Okay, axe or axe. Okay, next one. Oh, that's it for the words. Let's go into the exercises. So now we're going to do the vocabulary exercises. Here we have 8 words. Some of them are very long, but they're all words we just studied. What we need to do is solve the puzzle, right? Again, this is a crossword puzzle, right? Crossword because you have boxes that go across and you have boxes that go down, so it's a crossword puzzle. Now we're looking at the words that go across. So the words that go across the page, number 1 is, well, first of all, before we do that, let's go over the words. I almost forgot, right? Let's review the words. Lumberjack is our first word. Lumberjack. Okay, lumberjack. Second, campfire. Campfire. Next one, joyously. Joyously. Next one, whole. Whole. Next one is wilderness. Wilderness. Next one is orchard. Orchard. Next one is adventure. Adventure. And the last one, short word, tail. Tail. Okay, now let's look at the words across, okay? Across, number 1, the farmer is working on a peach. Beep. Okay, so we're looking for a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, a 7-letter word. A 7-letter word that fits this sentence. If a farmer is working on a peach, what is peach? Peach is fruit like apple or orange or cherry. Where do those fruits grow? And if a farmer is working on them, remember it's a special type of farm where fruit is grown on trees. What did we say? What kind of place is that? We said it was an orchard. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's 7 words. We can put it in here. Yes, orchard. So the farmer is working on a peach orchard. Okay? Remember, an orchard is where trees that give fruit are grown. Okay, next one. Next one across is number 6. That's our next word that goes across. The beep was hard to believe. So we're looking for a 4-letter word that fits in this sentence. Now, it's the something was hard to believe. If somebody tells you something and you have a hard time believing it, what can somebody tell you? Well, they can tell you a story, or what's another word for story? What's another word for story? 4 letters? Well, actually, it's right here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And tale means story. If somebody tells you a story or a tale and you think, oh, 믿을 수 없어요, right? I can't believe that. It's hard to believe. The tale was hard to believe, okay? Difficult to believe. Okay, next one. Across is number 7. She spent the beep day writing. So this is interesting. You can spend the something day. Now, if you think about a day is a long time, right? Usually it's about 12 hours when you get up and when you go to sleep. What do you do during the day? If you do only one thing for that day, you've done it the entire day. What's another word for entire? You've done it for the whole day. She spent the whole day writing. Of course, she had breakfast, she had lunch, she had dinner, right? But most of the day, the whole day, almost all day, she just wrote. Maybe she's writing a story. Maybe she's J.K. Rowling's and she's writing the next Harry Potter novel. And she's very excited about her writing. Sometimes people do that. They get many ideas. They've got to write them down very quickly. And they don't take a break. They just spend the whole day writing. Okay? Maybe if you have some good ideas, you get excited about those ideas. Practice that. See if you can write an imaginary story. Maybe one day you can be a writer too. That would be very exciting, wouldn't it? Okay, spend the whole day writing. Okay, next one. 8 across. It is difficult to live in the what? Oh, it's a long word too. What word are we looking for? Where? Where would it be difficult to live? Well, think about it. Like I said, most of us, we live in villages or towns or cities, right? We need houses. We need stores to go to buy things. We need roads to get around. Imagine if there were no houses, there were no stores, there was no sign of human beings at all, and we were living there, right? We were living out in nature. What's another word for that place? What's another word for that type of place? Over here, we're looking for wilderness. And this is a really long word, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A 10-letter word, right? Wilderness is a 10-letter word that means, it's a difficult place to live. It's very difficult, 너무 힘들어, to live there, okay? Obviously, it would be very difficult to live in the wilderness. Okay, let's go over the words for going down now. Number 2, he went to Africa for an what? If you go to Africa, right, it's a different place. Different people, different style of architecture, many wild animals, very beautiful scenery, right? So what will you have? You'll have a wild and exciting time, won't you? What means wild and excitable time? Probably this word here, adventure. He went to Africa for an adventure. So many people travel to another place for an adventure, okay? So you might go to South America for an adventure. If you really want a very amazing adventure, maybe you go to the North Pole or South Pole. And of course, you can go to Africa for an adventure too. In fact, almost anywhere you go, if it's wild and exciting, it could be an adventure. Okay, the next word, still going down, number 3. A beep, long word, is cutting down a tree. But in this sentence, we're looking for the subject, right? The subject. How do we know? Because here's the verb. So someone or something is doing this. What are they doing? Cutting down a tree. Now remember in the vocabulary section, it was our first word. We talked about a person who cuts down a tree. So we're looking for the person, it's a job title, of a person whose job it is to cut down trees. Which word means a person whose job it is to cut down trees? Of course, it's over here. Lumberjack. Ooh, really long word. A lumberjack is cutting down a tree. So lumberjack, it's like the song. Maybe you don't know it. It's a long time ago. It goes, I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. I chop down trees, I eat my lunch, and I go to the lavatory. Okay? So it's kind of it's an old song. It's kind of a funny song by a British group called Monty Python. Look them up. But lumberjack, what does he do? I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. I cut down trees, I eat my lunch, and I go to the lavatory. Lavatory, what's lavatory? I have to teach you that because it's in the song. A lavatory, and sometimes people say lavatory, but in the song you can also pronounce it lavatory. Lavatory is another word for bathroom. And English is crazy. We have so many words for bathroom. Bathroom, of course, is 화장실, right? So you can say, where is the bathroom? Where is the bathroom? Sometimes people call it the rest room. Where is the rest room? Some people even say, where is the, I'll put it up here, where is the toilet? But that's not so polite. It's more polite to say bathroom, restroom, or lavatory, right? Restroom, bathroom, lavatory, toilet. Okay? Also one more, WC. But that's a little old-fashioned. WC, what is WC? WC is water closet, because a long time ago, when the toilet was first invented, it was put into people's houses. They didn't know what to call it. It's like a small room in the house, that's a closet, but it had water in it. You know, a long time ago, before, when people they weren't used to having water in the house. Plumbing was new, so they called it a water closet. Some people in some countries still call it water closet, but it's a little old-fashioned. Americans usually say bathroom or restroom. Lavatory or lavatory, water closet, more common in England or Britain, okay? Americans will normally say bathroom or restroom. Anyway, that's a very long explanation. We came from lumberjack from the song, I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. I chop down trees, I eat my lunch, and I go to the lavatory. Okay? So that's kind of funny. Anyway, that's lumberjack. Next one. Whew. Down, 4 down. We sat around the what? You sit around, what would you sit around? Especially when you're with your family, you're out in the woods, you're having a good time camping. So what would you, at night, right, you build a fire, and what would you sit around? You'd sit around that fire. What do we call that fire? Remember, you're camping, so we call that a campfire. We sat around the campfire. Okay, number 5, our last word here, going down. Number 5, we sang together, beep. Okay, kind of a long word, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're looking for an 8-letter word that tells us what? That tells us how did we sing. When I taught you this word, remember I said that this word is used with verbs. It tells us how we do something. And the examples I used were, you know, if you watch television and you're very happy, how do you watch television? If you read a book and it makes you feel happy, how do you read the book, right? How do you do these actions? How did you sing together? Which word tells us how did you sing together? Well, it would be this word right here, right? We sang together joyously. So we were very happy and we sang together joyously. Do you guys want to sing together joyously? Remember the song about the lumberjack? Everybody, I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. I cut down trees, I eat my lunch, and I go to the lavatory. Okay? If you sing that with a lot of happiness, you sing joyously. Okay, well that wraps up the vocabulary section. Let's take a short break now, and we'll come back and take a look at the reading section about mighty Paul Bunyan. Don't go away. Okay, everybody, welcome back. Now we're going to go over this story about mighty Paul Bunyan. Are you ready? Let's just read the first part here together. It's the year 1895. What? It's the year 1895? Oh no, that's just imaginary. I'm sorry. Okay, let's start again. Okay. It's the year 1895. The lumberjacks are all very tired. They've been in a forest chopping down trees since morning. It's a dark night, so they all sit around the campfire. Okay, so this story takes us back in time. It takes us back in time to the year 1895, more than 100 years ago. More than 100 years ago. And lumberjacks, right? There were many lumberjacks at that time. Of course, you know, we didn't really depend on metal or steel that much. Most people built their houses from wood. Wood was more important a long time ago than it is now. So there were many lumberjacks in the big forests, and they would chop down trees so people could use it to build houses, for furniture, and also a lot of people had to burn wood for fires, right? Coal and oil wasn't maybe not that common. Coal was becoming common, but wood was very common for burning also. So people needed wood a lot more in those days. The lumberjacks are all very tired. All of the lumberjacks are tired. Why are they tired? Because they have been in a forest chopping down trees since morning. When we use have been, it's very common to see since morning. He has been studying since lunchtime. He has been living here since 2005. So when you use have been, it's very common to say since, and that's the start, right? So they, referring back to lumberjacks, they have been in a forest. What were they doing? Chopping down trees since morning, all day. So they're very tired. If you chop down trees all day, you are very tired, right? So it's nighttime, their work is finished, and it's a dark night. So they all sit around the campfire. Okay, so at night, right, after they finish cutting down these trees, very tired, they're not in their homes, they're in the forest. So they're camping, and they build a fire to stay warm and to see, and they're sitting around the campfire at night. What do? Well, this is what they do. Let's read. The men want to hear a story, but not just any story. They want to hear the tale of mighty Paul Bunyan. Let's listen along with them. So they're sitting around the campfire and they want to hear a story, right? They want to hear a story, but not just any story. They don't want to hear any story like a story about something else. They want to hear a specific story. They want to hear a story that has to do with them. They want to hear the tale of mighty Paul Bunyan. That's the story they want to hear. They don't want to hear just any story. They want to hear the story about mighty Paul Bunyan. So, the author is saying, the writer is saying, let's listen. It's kind of an interesting statement, you know, all of a sudden, hey, let's listen. Kachi, you know, let's all listen to the story together, okay? And then we can hear the story about mighty Paul Bunyan. So what has happened here so far is the writer is making a scene. It's kind of painting a picture in our minds. We're thinking about these lumberjacks in a forest. They're very tired. They're sitting around a campfire. They want to hear a story about Paul Bunyan. And then let's hear that story together. Okay, so now we're going to hear about Paul Bunyan. Just like the men around the fire, Paul is a lumberjack. He works hard chopping down trees in the wilderness. But that's not why we call him mighty Paul Bunyan. So that's the beginning of the story, or talking about Paul Bunyan. Look at this word here, or these two words, just like. Just like means dokateo, right? Just like them. Just like him, I go to that school. I'm the same as him. So, just like the men around the fire, Paul is a lumberjack. This means the men around the fire are lumberjacks, so is Paul. Paul is also a lumberjack. He's just like the men around the fire. He's just like them Because he's a lumberjack. Paul, in this case, he refers back to Paul. Paul works hard chopping down trees in the wilderness. They're in the forest. There aren't any houses. That's why they're camping. There aren't any stores. It's hard to live in the wilderness. You have to camp out. But he works hard chopping down trees in the wilderness, in the forest. But that's not, what does this mean? That's not why we call him Mighty Paul Bunyan. This sentence means the fact that he's working in a forest, he's cutting down trees in the wilderness, yes, that's difficult. That's 힘들어 to do. But that's not the reason. It's not the reason we call him Paul Bunyan. There's another reason. What is it? We have to continue reading. We call him that because he is much bigger and stronger than the other men. Paul Bunyan can clear a whole forest by himself. Once Paul laughed so joyously that he shook the earth. Okay? This is, of course, Paul Bunyan is an imaginary character, right? Now, the reason we call him Mighty Paul Bunyan is not because he's in the forest chopping down trees all day. That's not the reason. We call Paul that because there's two reasons here. One is he is much bigger, and two, he's much stronger than the other men. There are many lumberjacks. We don't say the mighty lumberjack Steve, mighty lumberjack Joe. They're all kind of the same. We want to say Paul is special. He's mightier than the other lumberjacks. Why? Because he is bigger and stronger. He's different from the other lumberjacks, right? We're comparing him to the other lumberjacks, and we say, one, he's bigger, so he's taller, maybe wider, and two, he's a lot stronger than the other lumberjacks, than the other men. Paul Bunyan, this is an example. Paul Bunyan can clear a whole forest by himself. That's an example of how much bigger and stronger he is than the other men. What's an example? He can chop down a whole forest by himself. Wow! Just one man can cut down all the trees in a forest alone. That's pretty big and strong, right? Once Paul laughed so joyously that he shook the earth. This is another example, okay? So if we look at this, this is one example of how much bigger and stronger he is. And this here is the second, I'll put first here. First example and second example. Excuse me. Okay, so there's two examples. The first example, he can clear a whole forest by himself. The second example, he laughed so joyously. He laughed so happily and so big. Ha 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 ha, right? He laughed so joyously that he shook the earth. It's like an earthquake, right? Of course, Paul is an imaginary character. There's nobody, of course, can shake the earth by just laughing. He's just an imaginary character. Okay, let's read more about Paul Bunyan. Paul Bunyan eats much more than the other men too. We need a whole orchard of trees to get enough apples to make him pie. Paul also has a blue ox named Babe. Babe is also very big and strong. So here we learn about Babe the blue ox, right? We saw the picture before. But let's see here, first of all, of course, we're still talking about Paul Bunyan, right? We had two examples of how big and strong he is. Here's another one. It's kind of another description about Paul Bunyan. He eats much more than the other men too. So he's bigger, he's stronger, and another way he's different, he eats much more than the other men. How much more? We see the example. That means us, if we wanted to make Paul Bunyan a pie, right? Let's say we wanted to make Paul Bunyan an apple pie. If we wanted to do that, we would need a whole orchard of trees. That means we would need so many apples, all the apples in an orchard. Remember the picture of the orchard? It's a big farm. There's many trees on the farm. Each tree probably has 30, maybe 50 apples for each tree. And you need all the trees in the orchard, all of those apples, to make a pie big enough to get enough apples to make Paul Bunyan a pie. Of course, that's crazy, okay? Again, Paul Bunyan is an imaginary character. When we eat an apple pie, maybe it's this big, there's maybe 5 or 6 apples, not even the whole one tree, right, in that pie. So imagine the whole orchard of apples in a huge pie that Paul Bunyan would eat, right? So of course we're exaggerating. We're imagining a character so big and strong that he eats all those apples in one pie. Okay? Okay, Paul also has, here we hear about the ox, Paul's friend, the ox. Paul also has a blue ox named Babe. Babe is the name of the blue ox, Babe. Babe is also very big and strong. So just like Paul, Babe is big and strong. So, of course, Paul's a man, Babe is an ox, but they're similar because they are both very big and they are both very strong. Let's read about what they did together, okay? Or what they do. Whenever he gets an itch, Babe has to find a mountain to rub against. Paul and Babe have all sorts of adventures together. Okay, so this sentence here is giving us an example of how big Babe is. Just like we had examples of how big and strong Paul Bunyan is, right? We had 3 different examples. Here we have one example of how big Babe the blue ox is. Now, if Babe gets an itch, right? His back itches, and he can't scratch it because cows can't reach around and scratch themselves, right? That's crazy. Ever seen a cow with a leg? Besides their leg, they don't have fingers, they have a hoof, right? So they, how do they scratch themselves? When cows get an itch, they usually go up to a fence post or the side of the barn or the house and they rub against that, or a tree, and they rub against it to scratch the itch because they can't reach. But this says that Babe is so big, he has to find a mountain to rub up against, right? A tree is too small, he'll break the tree. If it's a house, he'll destroy the house. Babe has to find a big mountain so he can rub up against it to scratch his itch. Okay, that's how big Babe is. Okay, so the next sentence, Paul and Babe have all sorts of adventures together. Let's see what kind of adventures they have. For example, there was a winding road that all the lumberjacks used. Since the road was winding, it took a long time to go down it. Paul wanted to make the road straight. He tied one end of the road to Babe. This is an example of one of the adventures that Paul and Babe the blue ox had. If you read about Paul Bunyan, you'll read many stories like this, talking about how strong and how amazing the things that they can do. This is one example. And of course, for example, lets us know that. That's a good transition. For example, there was a winding road. Remember our vocabulary word, winding. It's a road that's not straight. It's twisted, right? It's a twisting road or curved road. Well, there was a winding road. All the lumberjacks used that road. So all the lumberjacks would walk down this road. But since the road, since means because. Not time, right? Like before, but in this case, because. Because the road was winding, it took a long time to go down it. It took a long time. That's a good expression. It takes a long time to go to school. It takes a long time to do my homework, right? So you're talking about a situation, it takes a long time to do that thing. Since the road was winding, think about it, because if you want to go from here to here, it's fast if you go straight, but if you go like this, it takes a longer time, right? So Paul Bunyan thought about that, and he said, well, these poor lumberjacks are taking a long time to go there. I want to help them. I want to make the road straight, right? Paul wanted to make the road straight. He wants to make the road straight, not windy. How can he do it? He tied one end of the road to Babe. Now think about it, that sounds kind of crazy, right? It's just a story. It's imagination, interesting imagination. So he took a rope and he tied one end of the road to Babe, maybe his tail or maybe a harness around the ox. What did he do next? Let's find out. The other end was tied to a tree. Babe pulled and pulled until the road became straight. Paul Bunyan and his ox, Babe, are not real. They are imaginary, but they come to life every time we tell their story. Okay, so before we saw that Paul Bunyan tied one end of the rope, one end of the road to Babe. So we got that rope there. Now he went down the road and tied the other end of the road to a tree to hold it in place. So that Babe just didn't, if Babe just pulled one end, maybe the road would go with him, right? But he wanted the road to stay, the other end to stay there, so he tied it to a tree. So one end of the road is tied to a tree, the other end is tied to Babe the blue ox, okay? So Babe pulls and pulls. Babe pulls the road, right? He's pulling the road and the road is twisting. So he's pulling it. What happens? The road becomes straighter until the road became straight. It's kind of a silly thing, but it's just a story, right? Paul Bunyan and his ox are not real. Of course that's not real. It's not true. It can't happen that way. You can't make a winding road by tying it to an ox and pulling it, right? That's kind of silly. It's not real, right? They are imaginary. We're just thinking about it. It's just an interesting story. It's a fun story. However, they're imaginary, but they come to life, right? Come to life means they sound real, or we think about them. It seems like they're alive every time we tell their story because they come to life in our heads. A lot of stories, a lot of characters are not real, right? Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, right? These characters are not real, but we think about them and they seem to come to life when we tell the story. And that's a lot of characters. Your favorite heroes like Transformers, right? They're not real, but they come to life when you tell their story or read about them or watch their movies. It seems like they're real. And of course, that's what we're talking about, imaginary characters. Okay, let's do the reading comprehension. What is this story about? This story is about A, B, C, D. A, lumberjacks. B, a real lumberjack. C, an imaginary lumberjack. D, an apple pie. Now we can see right away that A to C are kind of similar. They all talk about lumberjacks, right? So is this story about lumberjacks? Is it about what lumberjacks do? Maybe some famous lumberjacks? No. It started off talking about lumberjacks, but we're not talking about lumberjacks in general. We're talking about one lumberjack. Is he real or imaginary? B and C are opposite. Is Paul Bunyan real? No, he's not real. He's imaginary. So that's our answer right there, right? And of course, we're not talking about an apple pie. That was just an example to say how big Paul Bunyan was. So this story is about an imaginary lumberjack. That's the answer. Okay. Number 2. Paul Bunyan is so strong that. So momo that. So adjective that. Okay? So strong that he can do what? Remember, there were 3 examples we saw about how strong Paul Bunyan is. Which one of those examples is here that was mentioned in the story? A, that he can eat a giant apple pie. B, he can clear a whole forest himself. C, ride a giant ox. D, walk around the world. Okay? Remember, we're talking about strong here. Not so much that he's big, but that he's strong. Now, the first one is eat a giant apple pie. Do you have to be strong to eat a giant apple pie? No, you have to be big to eat a giant apple pie. They did use this as an example right, for how big and strong Paul Bunyan is, but this is about how big he is. That would show how big he is, not how strong he is, how big he is. So this is not the answer, because this example showed how big he was, not how strong he was. You don't have to be strong to eat a lot of food, right? You just have to be big. Okay, so that's not the right answer. Paul Bunyan is so strong that he can clear a whole forest himself. That was the example that was used in the story. That's the true answer, because you have to be strong to cut down all the trees in a forest alone by yourself. Okay, he can ride a giant ox. The story didn't say anything about Paul riding Babe the blue ox. It didn't say anything about him riding the ox, so that's not the right answer. And D, walk around the world. Did the story say that Paul walked around the world? No, it didn't say anything about him traveling. It didn't say anything about that at all. What it did say, it gave 3 examples of how big and strong Paul Bunyan was, but he was so strong that he could clear a whole forest himself. He was so big that he could eat a giant apple pie. But we're looking for strong, not big. So B is the right answer. Okay? Next one. Paul Bunyan's ox once beep by pulling it. What was the example, or what was the story about Paul Bunyan and his ox? What did they do to help the other lumberjacks? Did they straighten a road? Did they rub against a mountain? Did they clear a whole orchard? Or did they shake the earth by pulling it? Remember that, by pulling it. Okay? So what is the answer here? Well, if you chose A, straightened a road, that's correct, right? Paul Bunyan's ox once straightened a road by pulling it. Right? One end of the rope was tied to the ox, the other end was tied to a tree. Babe pulled the road until it became straight. That's the answer. Paul Bunyan's ox once rubbed against a mountain by pulling it. That doesn't make sense, because it didn't say he pulled the mountain. He just rubbed up against the mountain to scratch an itch. He didn't pull the mountain. Did he pull a whole orchard to clear it? The story didn't say anything about that. Did he shake the earth by pulling it? That doesn't make sense. And besides, it's the wrong person. Paul Bunyan shook the earth by laughing, not by pulling it, right? So that's incorrect too. Paul Bunyan's ox once straightened a road by pulling it. That was the example we read about in the story. Okay, number 4. Paul and Babe go on many beep together. What do Paul and Babe do together? They go on many what? Adventures, wildernesses, tales, orchards. Well, only one word really fits here, because you go on an adventure. You go on an adventure. Adventure is kind of like trip, right? We also use go on a trip. But an adventure is an exciting and wild trip. It's very interesting. It's an interesting or exciting time. Okay? So adventures. You can't go on a wilderness. That doesn't make sense. You don't go on a tale, and you don't go on an orchard. The only word that really makes sense in this sentence is adventure. To go on an adventure. Okay, let's wrap up here. Let's summarize. What did we learn about the imaginary character, Mighty Paul Bunyan? And here, this is, by the way, this is a book, the cover of a book about Paul Bunyan. As you can see, Paul Bunyan is a pretty famous character. Many kids in America know about him. He's getting a little bit old. It's a little bit of an older folk tale. But I remember reading about Paul Bunyan when I was young. Yeah, I was young once. Yeah, like you guys. Okay? Long time ago. But I remember reading about Paul Bunyan. Very interesting and exciting stories. And it's good for you to read about lots of different imaginary characters too. But what about Paul? What can we summarize? What can we say about Paul Bunyan? Well, first, we know he's a lumberjack. That's his job. He's special because he's much bigger and stronger than the other men, the other lumberjacks. He eats much more than the other men too. Okay, so those are a couple of examples of how much bigger and stronger he is. Paul also has a blue ox named Babe. There's Babe the blue ox. Paul and Babe have all sorts of adventures together. Of course, imaginary characters, they go on exciting adventures. All the different stories. There's so many interesting stories you can read about. And read about the stories. Don't just watch the movies. Read the books about these characters too. They're very interesting. And your imagination will like come on fire, right? And you'll be very excited and very happy. And hopefully you will read joyously about all these different imaginary characters that are out there. There's so many good stories to read and to enjoy, especially when you're young. And you can remember these stories when you get older. And you can read more stories too, of course, all your life. So enjoy reading about imaginary characters. This is just one. Okay, take care everybody. See you later.